Alright guys, welcome to part 2 of my life of Starcraft. I wanted to split that up just to give myself a minute to reset because we are about to enter the chapter where Starcraft 2 comes out and where my life changed immensely. And rather than just talking about me growing up and my experience with gaming and some of those funny stories of, skipping school and crazy people trying to beat us up for killing them in video games and stuff like that, this is going to be much more about my whole pro career and all of the ups and downs, and things are going to get a lot more emotional here. It's less reminiscing and funny stories, and it's going to get a little bit more serious and just a lot more information. There's so much more entertaining stuff to happen at this point. Of course, guys, first thing I forgot to tell you guys. So I mentioned my name was Fat Pig Sucker. My name was Fat Pig Sucker, right? But when I joined my Warcraft 3 clan FTR, the guys are like, dude, your name is embarrassing. You need to change it. So it was actually back in Warcraft 3 when I was like, oh, but I like Fat Pig Sucker. Like everyone at the internet cafe is like, hey, it's Fat Pig Sucker. You high five each other. You'd be like, hey, Fat Mushroom or something. Like everyone just knew each other by their aliases, except for the kids who are actually from the same school, where we'd tend to know each other's actual names. So it was really, really like this thing like, oh, but I am Fat Pig Sucker now. So I eventually changed my name to pig.random with all like capitalizations and stuff, specifically because I played random and I was like, why not? And that became my name at the internet cafe as well because it became my identity so much online playing Warcraft 3. But anyway, guys, picking up from the first part, I went on this European trip. We got a cheap flight through Seoul, flying Korean Airlines, 2010. This is about a month before StarCraft 2 came out, maybe 2 months at most. And yeah, I remember actually my friend, just before we went, all my friends were getting hyped. They're like, StarCraft 2 is finally coming out. It's only been delayed for 4 years in a row. Oh my God. And I was like, guys, let's face it. Every time a game gets hyped up, it's a piece of crap. I'm like the most negative guy like that. Like everyone will be like, it's a new Star Wars movie. And I'll be like, yeah, it's going to be crap. I'm going to go see it, but I'm going to expect nothing. And if it's even half decent, I'll be pleasantly surprised. Like I kind of set myself up for failure so I don't get hurt as much. And then if it's good, I'm like, yeah, this is awesome. So I like to be surprised pleasantly, but I hate being let down when something's worse than I think it should be. So with StarCraft, I was like, nah, I'm not going to buy it. And my friends were pre-ordering it. They're like, you don't get access to the beta unless you pre-order. And I was like, I don't care. It's going to be a shit game. This is actually what I thought to StarCraft 2. And my good friend Nick Mung, who I'm still great friends with, shout out to Nick, he just pre-ordered it for me. He's like, here's your code. I just ordered it for you. It's coming to your address like the day before in a few weeks or something. And here's your beta code. And I was like, what the shit? I was like, oh, well, now I have to pay you money back for it because I don't want you to just buy me something for no reason. He's just nodding to himself, smiling like, yeah, forced you to get StarCraft 2. So I was like, whatever. But I was still not hyped about StarCraft 2 at all. I did not care. And basically, we're on this flight, right? So I'm going through the tab, and there's a StarCraft tab. And this is one of my most incredible memories because it was my first time watching esports. And you guys might remember your first time watching esports. You might have forgotten it because it wasn't very glamorous. It was opening some average Twitch stream tournament. For me, this was an amazing experience. You're on a plane, right? Things already affect you emotionally more. You cry much easier on a plane because of the altitude and everything. That's a science fact right there. So I'm there, open up this tab, and I'm like, Brood War, I love this game. StarCraft 1 was so much fun. Let's watch this pro-Korean StarCraft stuff. I bet this will be cool, And I open it up. It's a bunch of I think they were OSL games. They were very famous matches from big tournaments, and they were individual games. They took the best games. There was 3 or 5 different games, and they had the Korean commentary with English subtitles, perfect English subtitles as well, which is so rare. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And holy crap, I had never watched pro stuff before. I'd watched a little bit of pro replays of Warcraft. It is not the same. Oh my God, the movement, how fast they were expanding across the map. I remember this TVZ, the Terrans dropping Marines behind the mineral line, and the Zerglings are all they can't get surface area. This is the first time I ever saw this. I was like, oh my God, there's 4 Marines in this dropship are just killing so many Zerglings, and there's science vessels skirmishing around the map, and I think it was Biotank. I think this is a really old game. And then eventually Ultras came out. There's this back and forth map, and the commentary was so good because the commentators kept highlighting things this 6 o'clock base is really important. Or no, it wasn't 6 o'clock, it was 9 o'clock. The 9 o'clock base is really important. If the Zerg can stop the Terran getting this 9 o'clock base, then he's not going to have enough economy to keep pushing into the Zerg. His bases are mining out and stuff. And I remember just being so excited watching this because the commentators made it so clear. And I had no comprehension of what units were good against what, didn't fully understand the unit interactions, but the mixture of the hype from the Korean commentary, the movement across the map, which anyone who's played strategy games can comprehend. And I already knew what all the units were. It was like amazing. I remember I rewatched the VODs on the way back. I might have even rewatched them on the way there as well because I got through all 5 games and I was there. I was like, and I remember like there was a TVT where they're both doom dropping each other. And at the end of this, it was an hour-long TVT. Both players, it went to them, and they were both dripping in sweat, and they looked like they had just been like through some crazy shit. Like I remember just being like, whoa, and that was when it really clicked how intense and hard it was as well to actually play at this speed. Not only was I impressed by what they were doing, but then to see the sweat and the physical like reaction on their bodies from the stress and the focus, I was blown away. I was like, wow. Because I never had that experience with Brood War competitively. Because, like I said, I didn't have access to computers. I wish I had been on forums and found competitions and played online with people from a younger age, because I think I would have loved it. But it really wasn't until now when I finally had my eyes open to this. We came back from Europe. My beta key started working. I started playing. And I hadn't played Warcraft 3 1v1 ladder in years, like at least 3 years. And even if I'd played like 3 or 4 years before, it was probably only for like a few days or a week or something. It was back in 2003, 2004, 2001, especially in Reign of Chaos, 2002, especially in Reign of Chaos, when I had really grinded a lot of 1v1 ladder. And then finally I'm playing this Starcraft ladder, and oh my God, the anxiety, the adrenaline every time I queued up match was like, I forgot what this feels like. And it was like this amazing rush. I'd been playing Dota up to that point. I'd been getting super frustrated because my friends were dragging the chain. I had one friend who would always mess up his ulti, and everyone else would just yell at him, myself included. We were horrible people. We'd all blame him, but then other people would refuse to buy wards. So I'd be playing carry, and I'd have to buy all the wards. And it was a terrible Dota experience. We never got competitive because I never got into the competitive side of things. And finally, Starcraft's happening. My friend Henry, who's super into it when it first came out, sends me a link. He's like, hey, check it out. GSL's on. I'm like, what's GSL? He's like, it's the Global Starcraft League. It's the biggest tournament. It's in Korea. It's awesome. I'm watching these matches suddenly. There's MLGs on, all this sort of stuff. And I just got sucked in. I was like, oh my God, this is the most enjoyable thing ever. And I was still studying. But very quickly, I started to like miss classes because I was playing so much, or I was in class and I was like writing notes. And the lecturer would be talking and I'd be writing notes. And then I'd realize I'd started writing something that I was thinking about Starcraft. Because I was thinking about that bloody Turax that keeps killing me on Steps of War. And I'd be trying to so I'd be like, oh yes, the, rebellion, something, history notes, and, need to build a 9 pool in order to stop Turax. And I'd look down and be like, what the hell? Like I could not get Starcraft out of my head. It was just so enjoyable. And I just was grinding ladder. I was having so much fun watching these broadcasts. I remember Artosis talking on GSL as being a huge influence. It started out with Husky, just talking about who had more workers and economy harass. And I was like, got this sense of feeling when you're ahead, when you're behind, and how the economy worked more than I'd ever really thought about in other games, especially because you had the unit tab and the production tab. So you could actually analyze your games a lot better, right? And then I heard Artosis talking on GSL, and I was like, this guy is a genius. Because keep in mind, GSL is prime time for us in Australia. It's like on at like 6 or 7 in the evening, or 8 p.m. in the evening. So I'd watch that every night. And just the way he'd describe how you'd make decisions and how to play macro and how to scout and react was the most eye-opening, beautiful experience for me. I was like, oh, and Artosis would be like, when I play at home, I have a notepad next to me and I write notes. And you guys should do that too if you want to improve. Instantly, notepad next to my computer and a pen. I'm like, yeah, we got to do this, right? I remember very early on there was a LAN at City Hunter, which was like not my local internet cafe, but it's the internet cafe that's like in the city, and there's a branch of them all around Sydney, right? And I remember I just swapped to Zerg because everyone was complaining that Terran was Imba, and I played Terran mostly before that and Protoss before that. My strategy, by the way, was terrible. I would one base Thor drop every game as Terran. For the entire beta, I didn't understand why you would ever research Warp Gate, because then you can't queue up units. And I'd only ever have 2 or 3 gateways. So I'm like, well, I'll just float so much money if I can't queue up units, because I'm not going to remember to warp in every time. So I would have 3 gateways with 5 zealots and stalkers queued up on each one. That is how I played Protoss. And you know what's funny? I was always in the top league. I was always like in the middle of the bottom of the top league from when the game very first came out. Maybe not in the beta. In the beta, I had to work my way up there. But by the end of the beta, I was in Platinum. And then when Diamond came out, I was in Diamond and so on. Keep in mind, I was playing on the C server, which was a lot more competitive at the time. But nonetheless, my strategy was terrible. It was basic. My understanding of RTS and core concepts was still incredibly simple. So I swapped to Zerg because you guys might get a feeling that I like being the underdog. I like trying to be the hero in video games. I like playing from behind. So I like playing Zerg because everyone would bitch every game I'd win with my Thor drop as Terran. They'd be like, you're shit, Terran's overpowered, you're a terrible person. And I was like, well, you know what? I'm going to play Zerg and prove you all wrong. It's like the old days in CS, playing not with hacks, because I want to be the underdog, beat you, and then tell you how bad you are. There's still a lot of ego involved, right? A lot of E-peen. So I swapped to Zerg. I went to this tournament with my brother. He was super into it. We were talking a lot about strategy. He was super into Starcraft 2 when it came out as well. We hadn't gamed together for a long time, and suddenly we're playing Starcraft 2 together every day, and we're talking about it. So we go to this tournament together. I've just started learning Zerg, and the first guy I played 6 pulls me 2 games in a row, and I don't know how to drone micro properly, and I lose, and I'm out of the 1v1 tournament. And I was like, oh, shit. Well, first tournament, just swap to Zerg. I'll get better. It'll be right. Like, I took it really well because I didn't really care that much. But especially because there was a 2v2 tournament as well. And this is my first competitive tournament, right, with StarCraft 2. Complete pleb. Have no idea what I'm doing. My brother's a lot better than me at this point. Because, like I said, growing up, he always knew more about strategy. He always read the forums and actually looked up build orders and learned how to improve. Whereas I was super like, I'll just learn by feel, doop-de-doo. So we played 2v2, and I was like, okay, we can make it happen now. We'll make up for me getting knocked out so quickly in the 2v2. And we got put in a group against 2 teams. No one knew who anyone was, except for the fact that Moonglade was there. He flew down from Brisbane for this tournament because there was like a whole bunch of hardware that you'd win, and maybe a couple $100 or something, right? And Moonglade was there with some other guy who I don't think he was particularly good. And they had already played the other 2 guys in our group. It was a four-man group round robin. And only the top guys would go through. So we had already beaten the other 2 guys. And we had to play Moonglade and his mate, who had already beaten the other 2 guys as well. So the winner of us would go through. And they had just done a bunker rush, 2 racks, and 9 pool spine rush every game. They just spine rushed as long as there was an enemy Zerg player. If there wasn't a Zerg player, they'd just do the bunker and 9 pool. And they just used this every game. And because Glade was the big guy, everyone's like, it's Glade, he's so good, I can't believe he's coming here to beat us, which is such a dumb attitude. It's so awesome that he came down. And they're like, he's going to do this strategy. He's done it every game. And they're like whispering to me and my brother, we're like, oh, okay, how do we beat it? So we've got this little fan club of everyone else from our group who wants us to win because our games were kind of close, whereas Glade just shat all over them. So they're like, you should do this, you should do this. And eventually we came to the plan where I'm like, well, I'm going to 9 pool. And my brother's like, well, I'll go like 3 racks. I mean, everyone 1-based at this point. No one expanded in StarCraft 2 that early on, or very rarely. Liquid Rat was like the only guy doing expands. And basically, yeah, they did the rush. And I had 9 pooled as well. So I've got like a spine crawler halfway done when they arrived and like 8 Zerglings. And they just kept attacking. They just kept trying to do it. So they do the slowest like bunker crawl in. I think Glade had to send his drones home because he couldn't get the spines up on creep. And they just like push in. And I'm just there defending and defending. And we knew Terran units were very immobile. So we're like, look, we know they're going to rush me because I'm Zerg. I've got creep. That's where Glade wants to build his spines. So you need to just build up a big enough army, and when Stim finishes, that's when you can come and help and you can save me, right? I'll just try to defend against the 2 guys. So I got to enact my fantasy of being the underdog. 1 versus 2, Marines and Zerglings coming in, and I'm building more spines and queens and Zerglings. And I held on for like it felt like about half an hour. I remember it was like the most intense time ever. I'm defending little bit by little bit. They're coming in. And eventually they overwhelm me. And I'm like, oh, dude, they're breaking in. I'm losing drones. I don't think I can hold on. Like, it's over, man. I think I'm dead. I look over and he's like, no, I got this. I look over and he's just dropped like 3 medevacs filled with Stim Bio in the Terran player's base. He's got nothing. They've been putting everything into this rush against me. Just massacres his workers, kills his production, picks up and starts flying over towards Glade's base as well. Glade and him, they try to pull back, but then my brothers, no, they didn't even try to pull back. They're like, no, we'll just base trade. So they run over to my brother's base. He's got a single siege tank on the high ground in his main, a little pack of Stim Bio, and there's just Zerglings and like unupgraded Marines trying to like flood up this ramp, and they're just getting massacred by this siege tank, massacred by this Bio. The drop clears through Glade's base. They GG, me and my brother high five, best of one group stage. And we weren't even clear on the format at this point, by the way. Or Glade didn't know, so I think they didn't even care. And then the tournament organizer comes over, he's like, congratulations, you guys knocked Glade out of the 2v2 tournament. You guys go through, you guys are eliminated. I remember Glade just being like, whoa, what? And they're like, yeah, only first place goes through. And Glade is just like, are you serious? Like, I didn't even care about this match. For us, it was the most intense experience ever. Glade, the experienced best Warcraft 3 player in Australia, the guy who's been training Starcraft 2 since the beta came out. He got like to A- or B+ on iCup in Brood War, preparing for Starcraft 2. He's so good at the game, right? And he's just like, I don't even care about this match. We'll just do the rush. Didn't realize he was going to be eliminated if he lost. So me and my brother were so hyped. We had our little cheer squad of the other guys from our groups. We were like, yeah! And they were all like high-fiving us and stuff. And then we just got eliminated by some random dudes in the next round. And I felt really bad about it. But that was such an exciting experience. I remember Glade was really pissed at first, but he was just like, it's my fault. He's just like, yeah, man, congratulations. Like, we shouldn't have done the same rush 3 games in a row. It was pretty stupid from us. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Like, I'm just like super like, oh, it's Moonglade. He's the famous guy. Actually, I don't even know if I was fanboying at that time. I probably fanboyed more later when I knew more about the scene. I think I was still just like, he's a pro gamer. I don't know how to speak to him or whatever, but it was funny. So that was our first competitive experience there in Brood War. In StarCraft 2, as kind of fail as it was. But I got more and more hooked on ladder. I started just playing ladder all the time. I passed most of my subjects. I think I might have failed one. I can't remember, actually. I'm trying to remember exactly. Yeah, basically I finished university that year. So I finished university, guys, for the year. And we have like a 4-month summer holidays over. For us, summer is this time of year, December, January, February, right? So we get like 4 months of university holidays over the summer, huge summer break. And normally I would party, I would drink, I'd hang out with my friends, we'd go be idiots. You know, at that age, like 19 years old, 21 at this point. I was 21. And you know, you'd go do all that partying and whatever. And for me, I was like, you know what? I actually just want to play StarCraft. I've partied a lot. And it's fun and it's exciting, but it always feels like you're just trying to, you know, fill your boredom with something, right? StarCraft, even though I was kind of getting addicted to it, I always felt like there was something positive about the way I was playing it. You know, there was something great about the way I was investing so much time in it. I felt like I was actually learning so many skills and so much about perseverance and how to adjust and be flexible, even though it was still just a video game. So I wasn't fully clear on this line of thinking that StarCraft can be a positive influence in your life. So yeah, I was like in this point where I was like, fuck it, I'm just going to play tournaments this entire holidays. And all I did, end of 2010, start of 2011, was play online tournaments, every day grind ladder, kept trying to join better clans. Every time I played a tournament, I'd always run into pro gamers. I used to play the NA Go for SC2s all the time. And try to keep in mind, I had no idea about the scene back then. So I would think everyone was a pro. I would be like, oh cool, I'm playing against Desro, he's a top pro gamer. And obviously Desro was still pretty new to the scene back then, but for me, he was like a really good player. Guys like a Future, anyone who was on VT Gaming, because VT Gaming was a pro team. I didn't realize that any kid could literally say they have a pro team and not actually be pro at all. But I remember playing guys like Sheth in tournaments, DDE, Starlife, all these old school pro gamers. And I would always, after every single game, I'd be like, hey man, do you have any advice for how I'd play? And a lot of the time they wouldn't give me much info, and then I'd ask them specific questions about the game. With Sheth, I'd be like, oh, hey, how did you get on Team Liquid? Like, I'd ask these because I had no idea about the scene. I didn't really understand how it worked. How did you get on Team Liquid? And Sheth, I remember, was one of the nicest who gave me a lot of advice. He was like, well, I've been around in the community forever. I have this thread talking about economy on Team Liquid that has 500,000 views on it. I've been playing, competitive Brood War and whatever since forever. And I was like, oh, okay. So I started to look more on community sites, SC2C, Team Liquid. I started to figure out the scene more and how it worked. And literally all I did this whole holidays was just play games. I barely went out, except to hang out with Dot, my girlfriend, who had started dating a few months before. I think it was around this time I let her know what StarCraft was, because we started dating November. I didn't let her really know what StarCraft was or explain it to her for a long time. I was just like, oh no, I'm just busy today. I've got work to do or something. Like you come up with these excuses, but actually I was playing online tournaments. Eventually I showed her what it was and she was just like, what a nerd. Because she didn't really play any video games at the time. Oh, how that would change eventually and how much she would get into esports. But yeah, I was just playing tournaments, having fun, watching GSL. I started learning a lot more and more. And yeah, basically, I remember I started to develop strategy. This is the first point where I started seriously copying build orders. I started learning how to refine things and learn from other players. There was the old 3-roach speedling rush on one base. So you did like a 13 pool, 13 gas, 3-roach speedling rush, and you'd try to break the 3-gate sentry expand from Protoss before they got enough force fields. 3-roaches speedling one base all, and like terrible builds, but everyone was very weak back then. So you could break people with this. And these were the builds that I gravitated towards. Very aggressive builds, very one-basey. I didn't really fully understand macro very much at the time, even though I was steadily learning it from listening to people like Artosis. Steadily, I watched a little bit more of Day 9. Day 9 actually wasn't as big of an influence with me. I think it was like middle of 2011 when I started watching a lot more of Day 9 stuff and understanding a lot more of the fundamentals of the game a bit better. But I was very focused on Artosis as my main guy who I'd learned from how he would talk about the game. And of course, he was a Zerg player as well, so he had a very Zerg perspective in the early days. But yeah, the early strategy. Okay, so this is where I'm going to start showing you guys a lot more clips as we go on. This is one of the strategies which I was very proud to invent after, well, not invent, but I copied, because people were watching a lot of Brood War. There's a lot of discussion about what's the better game, even back then. And people would always talk about these old great Brood War matches. And I liked to watch it because I really enjoyed it when I watched it on that airplane. So this was a match which I watched and I loved it. I thought, holy shit, this is right down my alley. July Zerg versus Best, 2008 ever OSL finals. I watched this VOD. I'll show you guys a few seconds.
Charge them and disrupt the blockade. Oh my gosh, the Zerglings are through. The Zerglings are through. Oh my gosh, July Zerg may take game 2.
This is gonna be the
Cue
shortest
Bisu's
OSL final
face.
in the history of OSL finals. July is just crushing his defenses here.
Sorry, that Bisu face is just so good. He's like, oh my god, you dirty cheese, July Zerg. He's like, I can't believe my macro friend Best is dying, man. So anyway, basically what he did was he pulled drones and he drone drilled through. There was that wall off where it was an assimilator, a zealot, and dragoon. And he drone drilled through because, you know, you can mineral walk workers, right? So he drone drilled through so that they couldn't wall off behind with extra units, because you'd have drones blocking and your drones would be doing extra damage on the units that were blocking from behind. Also, if the enemy is not on hold position properly, I'm not sure how it worked in Brood War, but it does in Starcraft 2, you could kind of push the units out of the way a little bit when you A-move the drones as they just get on top of the unit, and it can kind of push it to the side out of the gap in the wall. So I saw this and I was like, this is strategy. This is my understanding of strategy in 2011, early 2010. I was like, all right, let's do this, StarCraft 2 style. So I invented the sickest build. I was so proud of myself. Basically, 14 gas, 14 pool. You'd either take an expansion and then cancel it once their probe left, or you would just, or you'd just keep the expansion. Or you would never even put the expansion down if you chased their probe off early enough. And then basically, you would just, as soon as that probe's chased off, you chase it with your Zerglings, make sure they don't have vision. You just pull almost all of your drones, and you just rally your Zerglings, and you just get to their base just after their first sentry gets out. And they're on one base, and they would always have the gateway, the core, and the pylon at the front with a single space gap with a zealot in it, right? So I would send an overlord in. Keep in mind, this is 1 month before Destiny had the famous retard magnet video. 1 month before then when I started doing this. And I would send the overlord into the base. The sentry would move back, chase the overlord so it's out of range of force fielding, and right as that happens, my like 13 drones would drone drill through the zealot and start attacking it from behind, and all my Zerglings, speedlings would rush in, and I'd just be rallying speedlings. And because I had like 13 drones, even if he pulled all his probes, and even if he force fielded the Zerglings to delay them, he wouldn't be able to get up a wall up behind. I'd eventually break in and overwhelm. And this was like the sort of cheesy, disgusting, silly build that I would always base my wins on. And this is the first builds that I started beating pros on. I remember beating VT Future in a Go for SC2 monthly final, which I got invited to because other players didn't bother showing up, and I had points simply because I played every single one. And I beat him with that game 1, and game 2, I did like just a mass Hydra drop on like 1.5 base economy into his main base on top of his sentries, Hydraling drop, and just killed him. Really cheesy builds. And that was like how I first learned strategy, was let's refine a basic build, something that's very digestible and has a very clear like set of this is how you do it. And I get really good at executing it perfectly. So even though it was pretty non-optimal, I started to learn how to really refine builds, and really the power of beating people way above my level, and it would make me feel so good when you beat someone like that. So it was really cool around that stage. I started to get these really cheesy builds down, started to improve. And then there was the City Hunter charity tournament, the first tournament I ever won, one of my favorite experiences. So this was another tournament at City Hunter. It was for charity. So you would win $300 of credit at this internet cafe for winning. So it was more about the pride. We didn't really care about the internet cafe credit. Most of us would play at home, right? But we went here. This is the first time where I started seeing all the guys who I'd been running into on ladder in the C scene all the time. Rossi, Light, all these old school guys who we all became friends. We all would go to every tournament for the next few years. Little did we realize we'd all become obsessed with StarCraft and we'd all become pros. And we all went there. I remember I had a Microsoft keyboard with like really sticky keys. It was terrible. I did have a good gaming mouse, but I didn't have a mouse pad because I had a polished table at home. So terrible setup. But I remember there was something about this tournament and I was confident, I was really happy and I was just loving it. So I was talking to everyone in the early stages and getting to know everyone. And somehow, as the tournament went on and I got deeper and deeper and I beat opponent after opponent, this little crowd started gathering around me. And I still don't really know why. Maybe it's just because I'd gotten to know a few of the people because I was talking to everyone because I was very friendly. But basically, people started gathering around. I remember my good friend Jackson was actually there as well. His girlfriend came, was just shaking her head like idiots playing games the whole time. Shout out to Wendy. But basically, yeah, there's this whole group of people around me as I got to like the round of 8 in the semis. And it's like suddenly everyone that was knocked out of the tournament was behind me. There's like 30 people just, well, it must have been at least 15. It felt like it was like a billion people because I'd never had so many people watching me play a game before. And they were all crowded behind me. And my opponent would have like a few people behind him. And it was this really bizarre experience having kind of like the home support almost. And it really G'd me up. And I was like, well, now I've got to win, you know? And I was just like cheesing people really hard. I remember I thought I was a macro player at the time. I remember playing Light, a Protoss player. And because I always struggled when I was going for a third base to defend a Zealot sentry push with force fields and Zealots. So my macro defense to this was to just bank up like 80 Zerglings off 25 drones. And when they'd push out, I'd just surround them. And because people were too bad to do instant force fields or be watching their army back then, I'd just get the surround, the force fields would be too late, and I'd kill all the sentries while running some Zerglings into their natural, and I'd be way ahead. These were the sort of builds that I would do. I was not the greatest player, but I remember I had never played so furiously before. I was smashing my keyboard as hard as I could. My mouse was going frantically. I was misclicking like a madman. I must have had like so much adrenaline pumping through me. I had so much more APM than I possibly could have ever needed. Completely useless APM for the most part. So, but it was so much fun. I eventually won the tournament. I think it was like 3-1 in the finals versus Rossi, if I remember correctly. And I was so pumped and everyone was like, yeah, man, you kicked ass. And there was something about this community that started to form around this point. And then me having this very special experience winning this tournament as someone who was still pretty new to competitive RTS. I was so excited and so hyped. Part of it probably went to my head. I probably thought I was a lot better than I actually was at the game. But it was something where from there, I was hooked. Like, I could not go back. I went back to university soon after that. But even then, you know, whenever I wasn't at university, I was like, hey, bro, play some customs with me. I keep dying to 2-racks. We'd sit there on Steps of War. He'd 2-racks me 30 games in a row until I could hold it every time. You know, I was starting to absorb this understanding of how to refine how you play and how to stop these builds that come at you. I started practicing more and more and getting better and better. And as a result, I did start failing subjects at uni. I started like not going to class. I was handing in assignments 2 weeks late. I was coming up with these stupid excuses. I just couldn't focus on it. I was enjoying playing so much. I was getting so much better. And then I saw these guys like In Control and Idra and all these pros and personalities, and even the lesser ones were getting crazy amounts of views because StarCraft 2 was the big thing. And I was like, I think maybe I can do that as well. Like, but to actually go and drop university and spend time, you know, gaming, that's a scary, scary decision, right? This was one of the biggest decisions I probably had to make in my life. But there was a point where I was like sitting in class and I was trying to focus as much as I could, and a strategy just popped into my head and I started daydreaming about that strategy. And I was like, nope. That was the moment where it clicked. I was like, this just isn't enough right now. Like, no matter how hard I try here, StarCraft is all I'm thinking about. I am obsessed. Let's give it a shot. And me and Dot, my girlfriend, Dorothy, we were getting pretty serious at this point. We'd been going out for like over 6 months or something. So I called her up and I was like, hey, I need to talk. Can you come over? And I remember I was so nervous about talking to her because that's when it would become real. I didn't live at home with my parents or anything for quite a few years at this point. So I didn't really have anyone super close that I shared my life with day to day in terms of gaming. You know, I had close friends who I talked about other stuff with, but I hadn't really shared my Starcraft life with people yet because it was something I was still new about and I was used to hiding gaming. For me, it was something where I was used to doing it in the shadows, you know, sneaking on a computer growing up, going to the internet cafe when my parents weren't around and playing there. So it was really weird then to make it real would be telling her, my girlfriend, who I was starting to care a lot about, and being like, hey, I want to drop university and play Starcraft. And I remember being like, well, I can't just say this because she's going to be like, whoa, are you crazy? She's just going to dump me or something, or be like, no, stay in uni. So I remember sitting there, I was like writing down why I wanted to do it. I was coming up with like a plan for how I could potentially make it work, how I could earn money through coaching, how I would train to get better and eventually hopefully be pro, but I would try to stream and try to do commentary. I had all these like very half-formed plans, which I thought was proof that I could make this happen. And I remember she came over. I lived in a room, by the way, that was about like this big, by the way. It was like, you guys would remember old videos of me streaming in there. Actually, I'll show you. Here's like a clip. This is my bedroom, and this is like the width of my bedroom. It was a mattress on the ground, a desk with a computer on it, and this. And I've got my Space Invader made out of train tickets on the wall. You guys might remember me streaming from there a long, long time ago. Actually, I guess not that many years ago. I was still there. So anyway, it's this tiny room. I get her in. We sit down on my shitty little mattress in my share house. And I'm like, look, I want to quit university and play StarCraft and make a career in the StarCraft. And I was so nervous, and I remember saying this, like I was like swallowing and stuff as I was saying it. So I was nowhere near as confident as I just said that then. And I remember she just looked at me and she was like, oh yeah, you know, you've been playing a lot. You've been going to a lot of tournaments. You've been doing really well. You know, because she'd started to follow it a little bit and ask me about what I was doing with it. She was like, you know, yeah, like if that's what you want to do, you should do it. I remember just being like, what? You can't just say that. You're a girl and a responsible human, and you're telling me I can just play StarCraft and try to make a career out of this? And I remember it was this like, oh, I was like ready to argue and like explain my point and try to get across how important this was. And she was just like, yeah, that's cool. And then she was like, as long as you try really friggin' hard and you take this seriously and you treat it like a job, and you're not just some homeless dude who just sits there playing video games on his ass. And I was like, yeah, well, that makes sense. Like that's kind of my plan. And we talked about it, and I talked about coaching and how I could start making money out of that because I'd already been doing that as like a part-time job. And then suddenly StarCraft was my life. But whoa, I had to make something of myself in this. So I started out saying, well, I need to pay rent. I'm going to be dropping out of university, which means I'm going to lose the bit of money, which was my main income at the time. We're lucky. We're kind of like Sweden and stuff, where we get a bit of money. So you can study full time, and you get government money enough to live a pretty basic, but you know, enough to live off. So when I drop out of uni, I'm not going to be getting that money anymore. So I was like, okay, coaching. I started coaching, spamming the forums, putting up these posts like, I'm going to coach, I'm experienced, I'm a grandmaster player on the Southeast Asian server, and I am experienced with coaching. Like, I will answer any questions in this thread. I'd put up threads like, hey, ask PiG anything. I'll give you advice. By the way, you guys can contact me here for coaching for $15 an hour. This is 15 like Australian dollars an hour, almost no money. And I would coach people. And the first ones I coached, I would coach them for like 2 hours. I'd be like, no, I need to make sure you get your value out of this. So word spread very quickly that if you wanted cheap as shit coaching where the guy would try really hard, you'd come to PiG. And very quickly I had 40 hours a week of coaching. My plan was I need to coach enough to make rent and food, and then I practice outside of that. And I started doing this, and I got better at it, and I tried to scale back the coaching to a more reasonable amount. Steadily, the rate went up to $20, $25. Nowadays, it's $60, though I try not to do so much these days as I'm busier with the daily and casting and that sort of stuff. But it started out very low for a very long time. And I would just train in the afternoons. I'd play tournaments when I could. And all I would do for like 13, 14 hours a day was StarCraft, probably longer than that. And this is where a bad habit started, where I didn't have a weekend for like 4 years. I just didn't have the concept of a weekend. So I'd occasionally burn out every like month or two and have to spend 2 or 3 days just vegging out because I just didn't take a day off ever. All I would do was coach and then play. Okay, I'm done coaching for the day. Let's grind some games. Let's watch some VODs, grind some games, coach someone. And that's all I did. And I very rarely went out, and I had very little income. So, you know, for me, the sacrifices that Dot made going out with me when I literally couldn't afford to take her anywhere. Be like, hey, let's watch a movie I torrented in my shitty little room. That was our lifestyle for a long time. And the fact that she stayed with me through that is something I'm always like, holy shit. Not only did she stay with me, she encouraged me and she'd like tell me how to do things better and that sort of stuff. So as much as my brother was like this big figure in my childhood with gaming, with StarCraft 2, Dot, I'm still with her today. We live here together. She is like the biggest influence in my StarCraft 2 career. She is the only reason I got as far as I did. I absolutely think I probably would have failed, or things would have gone very differently if it wasn't for her. So, yeah, basically, after that point, I remember Dot went on a holiday to Japan, and I qualified for my first international tournament, IEM Guangzhou. I went there. I'd been playing a lot more than usual because I didn't even have any time with my girlfriend to spend. So outside of coaching, all I did for like a few weeks was train StarCraft. Towards the end of this period, played Glade in the finals of the qualifier. He tried to one-base all-in me 2 games in a row, and I held it with my one-base Roach build where I expand on like 28 supply. My God, the builds we used to do back then. He just tried to one-base Lingbane into Roaches on a tight ramp 2 games in a row. Like he just wasn't trying. Found out later he didn't really want to go because ESL had been very slow to pay him money or something like that. So he didn't have the money to fly there, because this is back when you had to fly yourself to events, guys. The early days of esports, or not as early as 2007, but you guys get the idea. Anyway, I'm getting hung up. Let's keep moving. Let's keep this moving so that it's vaguely entertaining and under 6 hours. So I am Guangzhou, right? So I'm like, all right, let's go. So Iaguz, he got 3rd place in the qualifier. Glade gave Iaguz his spot. I was like, Iaguz, I'm going to go, man. You want to go? And he's like, yeah, I'll go. I'm like, yeah, like, we have to pay, right? But we win a minimum $600 even if we get knocked out without winning a map. So that will, help subsidize it. Little did we know we wouldn't be getting paid that for a very long time. But we basically grabbed money. I think I had enough money at the time. Maybe I think I probably needed to borrow some money off Dot. Oh my God, she would just support me. And then she'd be like, yeah, it's fine. You can pay me back. It's fine. So I booked us tickets. I had no idea how to do this. I went to a travel agent, was just like, we need to go to Guangzhou and get us a cheap hotel, please, because we really can't afford it. Stayed in this pretty shitty hotel. Looked like it was falling apart. It was pretty funny. And I just had to plan it on my own, and I'm terrible at organizing things. So we were quite far from the venue. The first day we got there, I was like, it's fine. We'll just find an internet cafe and check all the details when we get there. We didn't have data on phones back then or anything. This is 2011, and we were both massive nerds with shitty old phones. Definitely didn't have reception in China. No one in China could tell us where an internet cafe was. Everyone, the ones that would, were like, oh, you can't go there unless you have a Chinese citizenship. So we couldn't get on the internet at all. Until finally we found like Wi-Fi in some restaurant or something, and we got on our phone with our basic old shitty browser and managed to check emails to figure out where the venue was, and then we like found our way there. We figured it out, and then suddenly you're in this crowded anime convention in China with this stage, and I'm setting up there on the first day, and Demaga comes and sits next to me, and I'm like, oh, Demaga's sitting next to me. We're setting up on a stage right now. Mine was first match of the day. It wasn't meant to be, but one of the other players was late, so they're like, oh, just put the new kid in first. And I was like, oh, I thought I'd have hours to prepare. I should have just refused to play, but I was so fresh, I had no idea, right? So they were just like, yeah, just make him play first. And I was like, I'm not meant to play for a few hours. Like, I haven't even plugged in my mouse and keyboard. Like, no, just get set up. You've got 20 minutes until the matches start. Thanks, guys. The great days of well-organized IEMs. So anyway, Demaga sits next to me. I've just plugged all my stuff in. First thing Demaga does, starts ripping up this tablecloth. And he's swearing. He's like, God damn it. Demaga's a very happy guy, but he's a very confident guy. And he'll let you know when shit is stupid. He'll let you know if he's got a problem. He's just a very honest, straightforward guy. He's very happy. But he'll be angry if he's angry about something. So he's tearing up this tablecloth that they've got on the table, this black thing. They've got it taped down. Events used to always do this. I don't know why, idiots. They'd always say, but he's like, why do events always do this? This is so stupid. I'm like, why do you care? It's just a. I've been practicing on this thing with my mouse. I don't even have a mouse pad still at this point. I'm playing it in IEM. And he's just like, dude, your mouse pad will like slide all over this thing. It's not a firm surface. And I was like, oh, that's funny. I don't even have a mouse pad. Like I feel like it's pretty okay for me. And he just like looks at me. He's like, oh shit, did you forget your mouse pad? And I was like, no, Demaga, I don't have a mouse pad. I play without one. I've got this like smooth table at home. It's really good. It's a really good surface. Trust me. And he just, you can see the moment where his eyes kind of like he's like had that thought process like, this guy's This guy's the really noob guy from Australia who has no idea what he's doing and knows nothing about professional play. I was so unprepared. I just knew nothing. I was such a pleb. It's so funny. So he's like, right, you really should get a mouse pad. And he just goes back to tearing up his and getting his setup going. And I was just like, and I recognized that he recognized that I was noob. I saw this and I was like, I just spoke to Demaga. I was so happy. I was like beaming this whole time. I was so happy just to be at this event. I knew I didn't belong there yet. These guys were pro gamers, but I got to meet Hasuobs, talk to him a lot, Demaga, ask these guys questions constantly. I basically just followed them around the event, just being like, what about this strategy? Oh, why do you do that? Sitting behind them when they're practicing, when they're watching replays, just asking them so many questions because I wanted to absorb their knowledge. I wanted to learn everything that they knew about the game. And it was this eye-opening experience. Greg was there, Idra. He ended up winning that tournament. When I played, I got completely smashed. I played Puma first, and he like killed me with his first 6 Hellions or something. It was terrible. I had this build where I had a macro hatch as part of the wall off at the front of my natural, and he killed it with Hellions. It was so bad. The setup was bad. I think it might have been a bit laggy. You could hear the Chinese commentators screaming. The crowd was constantly cheering when nothing was happening. It was this whole new experience for me. I felt overwhelmed. I still loved playing there. And then I got wrecked by Hasuobs. And then I lost to the Chinese guy, Chinese Zerg as well. Can't remember who it was. But yeah, great experience. We got to go out to restaurants. We're in this city overseas for esports. I got to see the lifestyle of these pros firsthand. And I was like, they travel to these cities and they're just eating. We're all eating in these restaurants together. I'm like, they're out here experiencing the world. They're playing games at such a high level. When they talk about the game, sometimes I don't fully understand what they mean when they say something because my knowledge was just so much lower than theirs. And that was eye-opening to me. It just made me want to live their lifestyle, especially after the event. I tagged along. Oh my God, I was like this. I was a little bit chubby then as well. And I had like shorts on and this shirt. And I'd been like sweating all day in Guangzhou. And I was like this lost nerdy 22 at that time, 22-year-old. And I was just like, oh, hey guys, can I come out party with you? And like Rotterdam and Idra and I think... Yeah, basically Rotterdam and Idra and a few other people went out to celebrate after Idra won, and me and Igaz tagged along because obviously me and Igaz were attached at the hip because we were staying at the same place. And we went out partying together, and it was like we had this crazy night in Guangzhou. We couldn't get into this club because I looked so bad. So this random old dude outside who had a monkey on his shoulder came up and was like, hey, white dudes, I like you guys. Gives us all cigars, gets us into the club and starts just buying us drinks. Like we had this crazy night with all these bizarre experiences like that. And I remember just being like, holy shit, like it was so cool because even though I was this lost nerdy kid, everyone was nice enough to like include me in what was going on. I had a great night partying and I was just like, shit, I don't want to just be some guy who coaches and maybe does some commentary at home eventually. I want to be a pro gamer. That was the moment where that really clicked for me. And I was like, I want to do this. I want to be a pro. And that's where I started to go down that path a lot more. I started to focus on my training more and more and really trying to grind in that direction. So after Guangzhou, I got really set on qualifying for WCG because in 2011, that was one of the few tournaments Australians could play in. I got knocked out of the qualifiers because Glade came down to Sydney because there was better prizes in that qualifier. Got wrecked. It wasn't really an eventful tournament. I went to Melbourne, and one of my students who I coached actually put me up in his house. He picked me up. I got the cheap flight to the airport, like on the edge of Melbourne, like way out in the country. He drove like an hour there and an hour back to get me. They put me up in his couch. They like bought me dinners. They showed me such a good time. James, massive shout out to you, mate. You really took care of me. And then I still didn't qualify. Targa had just moved down, Warcraft 3 veteran as well, way more experienced in RTS games. He destroyed me in the qualifier. And I was like, oh, crap. Because Targa was studying in Melbourne for a few years at that time. And I was like, but I refused to give up. I was like, no, I'm not going to give up. This is the last big tournament for this year, 2011. I want to qualify. So I flew myself to Brisbane for my third WCG qualifier. And I remember this time, we went on a holiday there together at the same time. I was like, hey, how about we go here, because I can't afford to go on a holiday separately, and I try to qualify, and then we spend a few days in Brisbane afterwards. This is, I don't know why she stayed with me, guys. I'm the luckiest dude ever. But basically, we went down there. I actually crushed that qualifier. I think I won it. or I at least got second placed. It was top 2 qualified. Did really well. I was really happy. I remember there was this moment there. We finished really late at night because tournaments were always poorly organized back in the day. And it was in the Valley, Fortitude Valley in Brisbane, which is this nightlife area, right? So we come outside at like midnight, 1 in the morning. I'm so happy because I've just qualified for this tournament. Dot's half asleep. We're walking back to our hotel and it's just 19-year-olds, 18-year-olds drunk everywhere. Everyone's partying. And this was the first moment, I think, where I really like looked around. I was like, all these people seem like they're having fun, but it seems so meaningless. Like, I just qualified for the World Cyber Games Australia 2011, and it was something that it meant so much to me because I'd failed twice before. I'd flown myself to 2 different cities after trying to qualify in my own city, and I finally qualified, and it was like relief, but also like, that feeling of succeeding at something you're trying really hard at. And it was still just a qualifier, but I finally did it. And I remember just being like, I don't envy these people getting drunk and falling all over the place and trying to sleep with each other at all. Like, I honestly feel like spending my night just playing Starcraft in this internet cafe with a bunch of like-minded nerds and people who are in my clan. We're all starting to be friends at this point. We have this community. It was something where I was like, I would not trade this up for the world. Like, this is just the beautiful days of 2011. Yeah, it was really nice. Eventually, WCG finals came along, 2011, something everyone who went to, this was like a meme in the Australian StarCraft community for so long because it was so badly organized. The people that would host WCG in Australia were terrible. After this year, we didn't have WCG because they were in legal action with the main Korean corporation saying they didn't give them enough money or something. When these guys did a terrible job of organizing it, it was atrocious. Obviously, I don't know what was going on behind the scenes, but it was so funny because so I was qualified. We were qualified 2 weeks before the event. There starts to be these email chains where people are like, because we already had a thread, people are like, hey guys, you've all qualified like a month before. You're going to get your flight soon. Keep an eye on your email. And they put everyone in it. No blind CC. All the CS players, all the LoL players. LoL was just starting to become a thing at this point. It was still very, very niche. No one really knew much about LoL. But LoL, CS, and StarCraft, right? And then a few days before the event, people start emailing in this chain saying, we haven't got our flights yet. And the CS players are like, oi, cunts, dickheads. Like, they just go off. Like, the CS players are super aggro, kind of jock style, very abrasive players. The LoL players, massive trolls. They're trying to just bait the CS players into getting angrier. There was one especially who just kept on, I think it was Kingpin. He just kept trying to just prod these guys to get angrier and angrier at the organizers. And then like a day before or 2 days before, the organizer actually checks his email and he's like, oh, what? You guys don't have flights? I thought we had flights. It's for like 30, 40 different players across the games. And we all had to go to the Gold Coast to the first EB Games Expo, a gaming store, started running an expo there. So the night before, or 2 nights before, we get a flight emailed to us saying, all right, guys, you got to be at the airport at 5 a.m. or like 4:30 a.m. for a 6 a.m. flight to Brisbane, not even the city that it's in. And then we'll have a coach to take you the extra 2 hours to the venue where you can then immediately start playing. And hopefully we'll finish within the 2 days of the event. And we were all just like, what? And the CS players were raging. They were like, you guys are fucking hopeless. They were screaming at these guys. So we all got up crazy early this morning. I remember some friends randomly arrived at my house the night before and we had some drinks. Terrible idea. I was such an idiot. I just couldn't say no to them. I was like, oh, well, you're here. I guess I'll just have a few drinks. End up staying up till like 1 in the morning, get 3 hours of sleep like a moron when I had to be playing the next day. I was still very immature at that point. So we get this flight, we get up there, we get this bus. We're all still excited to be going to this event together. Iguz is there, Mafia, Moonglade, T-Gun. We finally start playing. First set, I'm up against T-Gun, my nemesis. This guy destroys me. Cheesiest player ever, but amazing micro, great ZVZ player. He just 2-0s me, wipes the floor with me in like a 10-minute series, best of 3. And I'm like, shit. I tried so hard to get here. I stayed up late last night. I didn't sleep like an idiot. I was so angry at myself. And I started feeling really crook, right? Because I hadn't slept. And then you got the adrenaline in these games. And then you're playing bad, so you're disappointed. And then I had to play Rossi, really good Terran player from my city. And he's just like, okay, he's just playing really well. I remember the first game, he beats me. I think it was like a Hellion run by, got way ahead. And I was like, oh, I'm 1 game from being eliminated from this tournament. I put so much into qualifying for here. I'm about to fuck it up. I fucked it up. I didn't sleep properly the night before. I can't believe I had those couple of beers. I was so angry at myself. And then I was like, you know what though? you trained hard for this. And just to give you guys the setting, this is the first time I ever took a break from coaching for a tournament. WCG Finals 2011. I took a full week off coaching before this. I said, no coaching, guys. Sorry to all my students. You can book in for the week after. As soon as I land, I will start coaching again. But I'm going to do 1 week where I'm not earning any money because this tournament's important to me. And all I did was grind Korean ladder. And this was the first time I really played a lot of Korean ladder. I played a little bit, but mostly I played NA and Southeast Asia. And then I was like, you know what? I got this Korean account off one of my clan mates. We shared it because you had to have a Korean social security number to get an account. It was this whole complicated thing. So basically we shared it and I just grinded games for a week, like 30 games every day. And this is more than I'd played ever because before I'd always had university. Maybe I'd played that much in the holidays the year before when I was first getting into it, but I hadn't played that much in forever. I was just grinding games. All the people were crazy aggressive. Cheese coming at me left, right, and center. It's Korean ladder. Everyone's crazy aggressive. People don't just sit back as much. There's not as many blind counters. There's a much more mechanical way of playing. And then I was like, 1 game from elimination, I was like, you can do this. You've trained hard. This is fucking important. You need to win this set. And I remember this is the first moment where I was way behind and then I turned it around. And this is one of my most special memories. I have a lot of special memories. Basically, he got a double drop in. I didn't spot it. He killed half the drones in my main. I evacuated the rest, and then I was on the back foot. There's drops hitting me everywhere, bio just running around. And this is that point where every time I had ever been in this situation up to then, I had steadily fallen behind, I'd lost hope, and I'd kind of given up without even realizing that this is what I'd been doing. And this time I was so mad at myself, and I was so angry that I just kept trying. And I was like, I will not give up. And I kept pulling drones from mineral lines. You guys know if you're a Zerg player, that nightmare situation where you're pulling workers from mineral lines more than they're mining to avoid harass. Your units are never quite in the right position. But I just kept playing and I kept moving my units around and I got on top of the drop and I slowly in between, every time I had a spare moment, respread creep. And he could never quite get the creep back. And eventually I stabilized and I'd squeeze out a round of drones and squeeze out another round of drones. And I was defending and I got a small link counter attack into his third. And I felt like I'd weathered this storm. And I'd never played that well mechanically before. I'd always been very focused on these kind of one-trick pony, sort of very all-in plays, very just win with one big attack after you open. Yes, you can be greedy at the start, but then you try to kill them. Finally, I was actually able to bounce back and absorb, and I turned this game around and I beat him. And then the same thing happened in the next game, except I was just slightly more on top of it. I didn't let his drops get as much damage done, and I was all over him. And then I started burrowing banelings, and I was coming in with counterattacks, and his Marines walked over these burrowed banelings, and they exploded, and he GG'd. And I just went like, oh my God. It's one of those times where you win, and your head is just in your hands, and you feel so good, but feel so stressed as well. I had all this adrenaline running through me, and I was panicked, but suddenly the relief came over me. And I remember Rossi came over, and he was always a really good sport. He was always a player I really respected. He came up and he was like, holy shit, man, you've really improved. Good game. And he shook my hand. He said something like that. It might not have been those exact words, but like that is it. And I remember it was such a special moment because I was like, you know what I have? I would never have come back from that position before spending this week really training hard. And it was like, oh my God. This was great. But then suddenly I felt sick. All that adrenaline in my body, all that stress, not sleeping the night before, and I just felt terrible. And I had to play Yun YJ, arguably the second best player in Australia. Fantastic Terran player, super chill dude, bit of a stoner, bit of a guy who just likes to have a drink and party, doesn't take the game seriously at all, super chill guy. I miss him. I wish he still played in the community, in the scene. And he was friends with me because we went to some of the local internet cafes tournaments, like the really smaller ones. We'd both be the only good players at. And he was like, yeah. He's like, you feel sick? He's like, don't worry, man. Let's play tomorrow. So we both went up to Docs was running the tournament. Docs was the guy who really basically ran the Australian scene. He was a badass, amazing guy. And we're like, look, Pig feels like shit. Can we please postpone our match till tomorrow? And he was like, yeah, don't worry about it. We can make it work. And I'm so thankful to Docs for that moment because otherwise Yun would have wiped the floor with me. I got a good night's rest. I went to sleep really early. I woke up the next day and I just rolled through Yun 2-0. He was out partying all night. Because he just didn't care that much. He was just a guy who came for the fun, came for the travel. And he was like, yeah, well played, man. Good job. He just didn't care. So I really lucked out there. And then I 2-1'd Mafia. And then I 2-1'd Iagos. And suddenly I was in the lower bracket finals from being on the brink of defeat. And I was like, all right, let's do this. And I had to play T-Gun, and he just wiped the floor with me again, 2-0. I just wasn't on his level, Zerg vs. Zerg. I got knocked out, I got eliminated, but I got 3rd place. And that was a really meaningful result for me. I was 3rd in Australia. I was top 3 in Australia. So that was really cool. That was a great moment for me because I feel like, you know what, I've improved a lot from being this guy who should be top 8 probably to I made top 3. I beat a bunch of good players in a row. I came back from behind. I showed that putting a bit more focus on practice and practicing harder could turn into some results, even though it's not like I got any money or anything from that, but it was still very meaningful at the time. So guys, wow, I'm really going on. So there's only a few more important stories left, I guess. I'll focus on the most important ones. And the next one, well, after that point, there were the ACL tournaments. Let me check. Let me look at my notes. So I think next was ACL. ACL started up at the start of 2012. They are now ESL Australia. So congrats, those guys have found huge success since those early days where they would all drive in their vans, set up a LAN for like Halo, Starcraft, and COD or something like that. And they would set up this LAN and they'd always do like Brisbane or near Brisbane, Sydney, and Melbourne, the 3 biggest cities in Australia. Absolute legends. And they would lose money every single time. You know, people would complain like, oh, the sign-up's too expensive. These guys would literally drive interstate every few months, set up these awesome LANs. This was the first time they did non-console events. They included Starcraft because it was the big game. I got 3rd at the first one, 3rd at the second one. And then finally at ACL Melbourne 2012, I did another thing where I took like a full week off, practiced pretty hard, and I drove through the bracket, crushed it pretty hard. I was really happy. I beat Moonglade in somewhat legitimate games. I think he had a bit of lag spikes that he kind of complained about, but it was a time where I actually beat Glade again, which I hadn't really done since I qualified for IEM, I don't think, a full year before that. I remember the finals was actually one of these nail-biting moments. I talked about before how I was the brink of defeat and I came back. Little did I know, that would basically be the story of my entire friggin' StarCraft career until later on where it was brink of defeat and then almost winning and not quite doing it. But in these days, it was always being the brink of defeat. I got to the grand finals from the lower bracket. So I had to beat Mafia in 2 best-of-3s. Both sets, I lost the first game. I was 1 game away from defeat and then I would win 2 games in a row. I remember there was so much adrenaline in my body. I was so tired because we actually had a different tournament before this. So we had literally 3 days of non-stop tournaments, each one like 12-hour days of play. Exhausting tournament. So I was drinking Red Bull through this finals and I was like shaking while I was playing and I had to run to the toilet because the Red Bull was going through my system between like every game and everyone was getting mad at me because I was also super anal about my table being wobbly. I started to get this real reputation around this point for being obsessed with my setup. I was obsessed with my mousepad being right, my keyboard being right, my monitor had to be the right glare, the right angle. I always brought a box to LAN. I brought a graphics card box. I would always bring this, even interstate, or if I was interstate, I might borrow it off someone else that had the right size box, and I would sit my monitor on it so it was at the right height, so the top of the monitor was with my eye level. And people would get mad because I would delay tournaments. So there was like this, everyone would hate on me. Everyone would get really pissed off. But I was so serious about competition at this point, I didn't care. I was like, look guys, for me, this is more than just a game. I'm sorry I'm inconveniencing you, but I will be that dickhead who complains until the settings are just right. I will be the Todd of Australia. And I don't regret it at all because it did help me win a lot of games where otherwise I'd be thrown off by the monitor wobbling because the table's shaking every time I move my mouse. I eventually won that series 1-2, 1-2 in the finals. Both series, 1 game down, 1 game away from elimination, and then winning 4 games when I was about to be eliminated. I was super proud of that. And then WCS Australia was a month after that. And this was the first time in my life where I said, there is like a $20,000, $25,000 prize pool. I win $4,000 if I win WCS Australia. I win $6,000 if I win WCS Oceania. I can win $10,000. That's like a year of my income at this point. Like that's how poor I was. I can win $10,000 if I win this. And I was like, I'm taking it seriously. I still want to be a pro, but most of my time was spent coaching, doing other things. And I was so disorganized. And I'm not, you guys can tell, I'm not an organized person. I'm not a guy who can do that superhuman, I coach and practice at the same time. I could do it and improve, but I was never going to be the top guy in Australia. So I was like, I'm not coaching for a month. I'm not doing it. I've saved up a little bit of money from my coaching, my $600 a week income, or probably less than that most of the time. I am going to put coaching on hold for a month because this is important to me. Like I put out blogs to the community and stuff like, I'm sorry guys, this is important to me. I'm going to try and do this. I trained for a month nonstop on Korean ladder. All I did was grinding games. And I started to get frustrated and go on tilt streaks because I'd never played that much. So I started to realize, okay, remember that old thing you used to do where you'd have the notepad and you'd write down notes on what you could improve on that Artosis said? I said, you know what I can do? I am going to watch replays every second day for at least 3 hours when I'm done practicing for the day, and I will write down at least one thing to improve no matter how minute in every single game. And I will look at that list, I'll focus on the most important things, and I'll think about that when I'm playing the next day. And I started doing this, and I started improving faster and faster, and I started getting really good at abusing infestors and how broken they were. It was like this period where I started improving a lot. I started to realize I couldn't play for 8 hours in a day because the last 3 hours I would just get really tilted and I'd play terribly. So I started to play 4 hours, have a 2-hour break for lunch, maybe do a bit of exercise, and then train for another 4 hours. And then I'd watch GSL, and I'd think about games and watch replays in the evening. And I started to get this bit more structure to how I was playing. I still wish I could go back in time and whip myself and work harder and more organized. I'm sure I could have trained myself a lot better if I had all the knowledge I do now. But yeah, it was like this month of hardcore training, and I went to WCS Australia, and holy shit, I gotta show you guys something actually. This is the worst poster ever, which they made for me at WCS Australia. I qualified for it pretty early, and they made one for all the players. And this is the worst thing ever. They took this, I was just telling you guys about ACL Melbourne a month before this. So the ACL guys were running WCS. And they took this photo at that event when I was at the end of 3 days of 12 hours of play. I got a horrible flu the next day. So I was in pre-flu where you're like feeling exhausted and stuff. And they took this photo randomly when Dot, my girlfriend, who started coming with me to events, she was traveling with me all the time. She was taking photos of me. She was like by my side doing so much awesome stuff. And she's a great photographer. There's like hundreds of fantastic photos of me smiling with a thumbs up on the internet. And they choose to use their photo to make this poster. Oh my God. I'm a very vain person, as you can tell. So, yeah, this was a terrible photo. But I still was so proud to have this poster made up, hanging in this big hall. When we first went into the venue, and there was posters with our faces on it. Does that even look like me? It's so funny. Look at the difference, guys. Of course, I was a lot bigger back then. I was about 95 kilograms just after this point, 94 and a half, 95. I'm like about 78 kilograms at the moment. So if you guys, that's about 210 pounds down to 170 pounds. I've lost a lot of weight in the last year, a lot healthier, but yeah, so that's WCS Australia, right? So we walk in, it's this huge hall, we've never had a venue like that before, and there's posters up, there's $10,000 if you win both of these tournaments. It is like, they've got this whole separate room, they're not gonna let anyone in, people can like watch, like media can come in and look at us from behind a banner, like a railing. And that's it. People can't interrupt us while we're practicing. Super awesome. They put us up in a hotel in the city, even if we lived in Sydney, where it was held. Super special tournament for us. And you can imagine, this is the biggest thing we ever had in Australia. Tastosis were coming down to cast. The first time I got to meet Nick and Dan. And yeah, basically I was more nervous than I've ever been for this event. But I trained so hard that I remember going into it, in a way, I wasn't as nervous. Actually, you know what? In the later stages, I got more nervous. In the early stages of this tournament, because I practiced so much, going to people like, oh, how do you think you're going to do? And I would explain to them, I'd say, well, you know, I haven't coached for a month. I have lost a month of income to prepare for this tournament. I am kind of going all in on doing well here. But you know what? After playing this much Starcraft, I know that I won't necessarily win. Moonglade's a fantastic player. T-Gun's a fantastic player. There's a lot of great players, and they all wanted as much as me. And I was saying, you know, I've come to realize that I can't just expect myself to win every game, no matter how hard I try. But what I do want is I want to play well. Because at this point, I had had disappointing tournament experiences, and there is nothing worse as a competitor than going to a tournament and playing way below your skill level. But at this point, I started to find this like Zen mentality of like, as long as I play to my level, things can always go wrong in StarCraft, especially in an individual game. You can always just happen to not scout something. People call it luck. I call it your inability to play perfect, because I don't think it's really luck. I think it's just an inability to cover every option. You only cover what you can. And sometimes you just happen to not be covering the right options. I guess you can call that luck if you want. And I kind of had this Zen mentality about it where I was like, even if I get knocked out early, if I play to the level which I expect of myself, I will still be happy. As the tournament went on and I plowed my way through the bracket, I did start getting a lot more nervous, thinking I can win $4,000 if I win WCS Australia. But it was pretty intense, right? So I remember I started getting through. What were the results? I 2-1'd Ninja. I 2-1'd Edge. I beat T-Gun 2-0. I finally beat the Cheese Master himself. I love T-Gun, by the way. Great guy. He was a good friend. Someone who I've kind of lost contact with since he's been in the LoL scene a lot more. But I really should kind of... I want to catch up with a lot of these guys who we've all kind of drifted apart over the last few years. But yeah, T-Gun, I took down 2-0, and then I had to play in the upper finals against Glade. And I was in this hall filled with people. There's like 350 people in there. And I remember they turned away like 500 or 1,000 people because they said like, you're only allowed in if you have a ticket. You can't come here. And then it ended up being underfilled. They actually could have fit more people there, but they were very worried about fire restrictions and all this sort of stuff. So there was a huge bar craft going on in Sydney at the same time. There were bar crafts all around Australia in all the big cities, and everyone was watching this tournament. And it was such a special moment for me to be in the upper finals. I started to think about the money. I started to think, I have the minimum, amount of money and all this sort of stuff. I started to get nervous. I remember I was getting to that point where you start to think too much about what if I win, and you start to freak out. I'm thankful for Mayo, my manager at the time. He would actually come up to me. I think he saw that I was nervous, and he'd really break the tension. Specifically what he'd do, he'd come up and he'd go, hey, Pig. He'd put on this like really bogan accent. A bogan is kind of like a redneck or a chav. If you guys aren't familiar with the term, he'd put on this real bogan voice and he'd be like, hey, petrol bane bomb these dickheads, man. Yeah, mess them up, hey. He'd do this like ridiculous voice, and I'd be there like thinking about my strategy. I'd be like, yeah, I'm good. He'd be like, you good, man? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, petrol bane bomb these dickheads. And I'd instantly just like crack up and I'd start laughing to really ease the tension. And Dot was there. She was just like, you can do this. Just kick some ass, you know. I had so much support from Dot there as well. She was like by my side. After every series, we were like high-fiving, talking about the games. Dot was taking photos the whole time. She was always there. And like the smile on her face when I would win and look at her after I won a game was actually probably more important to me than even what I felt, because I could kind of see my own satisfaction like reflected in her. It was really cool. So, yeah, basically, I got to the upper finals. I played Glade, and I beat him 2-1. I just played well. I used Infestors. He didn't want to use Infestors. The longer the games went, the more I would win. And I beat him. It was really tight, but I beat him, and I was in the grand finals. Whoever came through the lower finals had to beat me twice. And I remember being so happy. Glade finally came through to the grand finals. And basically, yeah, he played against me and he beat me 2-1 in the first set. And I remember feeling so disappointed and so distraught because I knew I should be beating him. I had this like weird, like I should be beating him because I'm using the Imber unit. I'm using Infestors. I know I can beat him because he's kind of playing this movement-based style, which in that current period of the game with how strong Infestors were, was not the strongest way to play. Glade was a superior mechanical player. He had more range than me. He had more understanding. But I knew I could beat him because I was the guy who was going to use Infestors. And I had perfected defensive play, whereas he was more of an aggressive player. But he just kept getting me. And I remember being so frazzled. There was so much nerves and adrenaline running through my system. And I couldn't think logically about what was going wrong in the games. I was just like so caught up in the emotion of being in this hall with people cheering and fans going crazy. And there's like Tastosis somewhere. And I think it was HD and Pain User were casting our finals. And I went out to talk to Dot after the first series. And she was there and she was like, and I was like, I don't know, fuck, I'm letting this slip away. And Dot came up and Dot was just like, she's just like, Jared, shut up. Listen to me. And I remember because Dot, at this point, she was like Gold League. I taught her the basic mechanics and she got to Gold League like instantly, but she didn't really play that much, but she watched a lot. And I always talked to her about my builds. So she's there and obviously she's just like calmly like, she's fucking pumped as well, but she's keeping it under control. She's trying to be like my rock. And she's like, Jared, you keep losing your third base. Every time your third base, he just keeps on taking, like killing lots of your units there, and he's canceling your third every game. Just take your third later and build more units. And I was like, oh, I don't know though, like I really need that third. And she's like, look, trust me, you're better than him in the late game. Like you're using infestors really well. You just need to take that third later so that he can't get the tempo going. Like he can't, mess you up. And I was like, okay, all right, I think you're right. And I went into the final series and I just built more units and then took a slower third. And Glade's coming in with like 3-pronged aggression and I'm just shutting it down. And he's coming in with roaches from multiple sides, I'm shutting it down. He's coming in with muters and I just chain fungal it. I just shut it down and I 2-0'd him. And I'm simplifying the story right now, but in terms of strategy, that's what happened. And I felt like I was playing the exact same as I had in the previous series, like really good mechanically. And that's part of why I was so distraught the first time, because it wasn't working. I was playing so well mechanically, but I wasn't thinking about the strategy. I wasn't adjusting. Glade was picking me apart. And then Dot actually saved me. There's no way I would have won WCS Australia in 2012 if she didn't say that. I just didn't have that stage presence. I didn't have enough experience to stay calm and analyze the situation. She told me this and I just won like that. And it was like, holy shit. And this was one of the most amazing moments of my career. Hundreds of people there in the audience. Everyone was cheering so loud. I got to come out. The first thing I did was hug Dot. I was so relieved and happy. I went up on the stage. They gave me an Australian flag. My whole family was there, including my little brothers. It was the first time they ever watched me play Starcraft. My older brother was there as well, Anthony, who was such a big part in my childhood. And yeah, just standing there on stage with them, holy shit. I told myself I wouldn't cry. Yeah, it was like really this moment where I put so much into it as well, because it was a full month of training for that. Like if I didn't practice there, I was so poor. If I didn't win money there, I was in such a bad position. And it was, honestly, it was just such a special moment for me. So I'll just show you guys the video.
Glade is going to be able to clean this army up.
So something I was doing yesterday to G myself up, because I was just roaring. Every time at the start of the game, I was just screaming, F yes, I'm gonna do this.
Ladies and gentlemen, down in the bottom left-hand corner, we have the man with 2 lives. He is the notorious PiG.
That's a lot, man. I've put a lot of preparation in. Basically, it was about 8 hours a day of practice, some days a little bit less. But even when I'm not practicing, I mean, that's actual playing game hours. There's watching VODs, watching replays, chatting to people about strategies. Basically, it's been my life for the last month.
That was such a special moment for me. Like, that was when it all came together. That was, yeah, honestly, I don't know. You guys, like, I can't even explain it. I can't even say it. My chat's dead right now, so I'm kind of happy I can't see chat, but the highest high, that was the moment, my best moment in StarCraft 2, 100%. Won WCS Australia. Glade was such a gentleman about it as well. Like I said, he was the better player. He really was in hindsight. But I managed to sneak that one off him. The next day was WCS Oceania. I couldn't even sleep that night. I was so pumped. There was like an hour there. I remember they were pushing us out of the venue because the venue had to close because the games went on so long. Everyone was coming up for autographs and just congratulating me and saying how amazing it was that, Glade was this unstoppable hero. And then, I'd beaten him 2 of the biggest tournaments in a row. And this was, way bigger than the ACL win a month before. It's just a testament to how great a player Glade is that beating him was so meaningful for me. Every time I beat Glade in my career, it was an achievement. It was something which I had to work really hard for. It was never easy. You know, I say it was simple once I adjusted there. I still had to play bloody well to beat him in that final set. But then I couldn't sleep that night. And from the highest highs to the lowest lows is the story of my StarCraft 2 pro gaming career. It really is. You know, I win this tournament, I win $4,000, and I was so excited, and I had no experience with this. And I finally got back to I went and had dinner, I went back to the hotel room. I didn't get there till like 1 a.m. or later, and then I just couldn't sleep. I remember lying there with all this adrenaline and excitement running through my body, and my brain was racing, and it was going over all the games and the excitement, and I remember my face actually hurt from smiling so much. Even when I'm laughing, I just couldn't help but laughing. There was so much relief. You know, when you laugh, when there's so much tension in your body and this relief comes out, I just couldn't stop experiencing that. So I finally experienced this just incredible release, this beautiful, amazing moment, and everything came together for me. So I was so happy and so damn thankful for that. I then the next day, I couldn't sleep. So I got up, I felt tired, I felt really crooked. We had to play WCS Oceania for even more money. And whilst I didn't play badly, my opponents played splendidly and they adjusted. Light killed me, the Protoss player. I hadn't played ZVP in the tournament yet. He was the only Protoss. And he wrecked me in some pretty nice timings. I just wasn't quite on point. And then I played Glade, and he early pulled me twice, and I just did this stubborn, like, let's just hatch first, a second game in a row. I think I can beat him with drone micro. Glade's micro was better, and he just got way ahead and beat me. And it was such a disappointing way to go out after winning WCS Australia. But that's the story of my career. Really, really amazing moments followed by huge disappointments. And learning to pick myself up after those was a big part of how I guess, it's what I got out of StarCraft is more handling failure than handling success, really. That's honestly what I think has made me a better person, is getting punched in the face so many times. Falling over and just desperately trying to pick myself back up. I'm going to try to get